Good morning, everyone. I see that, everyone's adding in their names to the chat. Anita, do you want to get us started?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Anita Au, and I'm the program lead for the SCAG's Environmental Justice Program, and I will be facilitating today's meeting along with my colleague, Annalie Ekman, who she's been talking to you all these past few minutes. So thank you for joining us for our first of 2 listening sessions for the Sustainable Communities Program, Call for Applications for Civic Engagement, Equity, and Environmental Justice. We hope that you are staying safe and healthy. At this time, if you haven't done so already, please provide your name and organization in the chat. So this will just help us ensure that this feature is working for you, especially if you have any questions throughout the presentation. So now I'm going to hand it off to Annalie.
Oh, I'm on mute. Thanks, Anita. Now on the slide before you, you see a handful of session logistics items. This listening session is anticipated to take approximately 1.5 hours. Please take care to mute your audio/phones, but I don't see anyone on the phone while you are not speaking. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have an open Q&A session and for general questions, and then we'll go into breakout rooms for more specific questions and conversations. If you have any questions during the presentation, please go ahead and put it in the chat box, and we will be logging all of those questions, and we'll do our best to address them during the Q&A and during the breakout sessions. If you think of something later, feel free to email Anita. Her email is on the slide here, and we will be sending out the presentation slides, so you'll have it along with a Q&A summary to anyone who registered for this listening session. Next slide, please. This listening session will include an introduction followed by listening session outcomes, an environmental justice imagery activity, the call for applications presentation and Q&A, breakout discussions, and the breakout discussion summary before we conclude. Next slide, please. Now, I'd like to go over some of the outcomes for this listening session. Ideally, you as participants will learn about the goals and preliminary structure of the Sustainable Communities Program Call for Applications number 4. And we as SCAG staff really want to learn about the potential projects and funding needs for organizations to do civic engagement, equity, and environmental justice work. We would also like to know and learn how technical assistance can be structured to better serve community-based organizations. Next slide, please. This listening session is just one space for you to learn and shape how this call for applications will be implemented. We're here to listen and learn from your thoughts and are happy to answer any questions or thoughts that you might have during this session. Because we're hoping to have an active and productive discussion, we'd like participants to be mindful of the following community agreements. First is to respect the mic. Everyone has a right to be heard, and we hope that you would speak from your own experience. Move up refers to moving into a more speaking role or moving up into a listening role, depending on how you're reading the room. Co-op, not co-opt. This is about all of us, not just one of us, so working in a cooperative space. And approach this with curiosity. We're SCAG staff is here to learn from you. We're curious about all of your experience, and we'd hope that this is just an open space to answer and ask questions. If there are any other community agreements that anyone would like to add, I'd ask that you raise your hand, come off mute, or add them to the chat as you think about them. You don't have to think about them right now, but if you do think of something, let us know. And I just want to acknowledge that we learned much more than just these 4 points, but these 4 points we learned from Design as Protest, which is a great organization. Next slide, please. We'd like to start off the session by introducing an activity that you can participate in throughout and hopefully especially after this listening session. We'd like to start thinking about what images you see in your mind when you think about environmental justice in your community. Our work at SCAG often involves creating imagery to advertise these calls, and we want to make sure that content is relevant to you and in your communities. Please share your ideas in response to this question on the slide in a Jamboard that I'm putting in the chat right now. Oh, sorry, Dorothy already put it there, but yeah, the link to the Jamboard is provided in the chat. And if you're not familiar with this feature, we will have a demonstration during the breakout sessions. And just so you know, the breakout room questions are already included in the Jamboard in case you'd like to explore those prior to the discussion. The Jamboard will be open for about a week, so please feel free to share your ideas both during this listening session in the breakout rooms or after the session.
Hey, Annalie?
Oh, yep.
Do you want to do a quick demonstration of the Jamboard?
Sure, yeah, let me share my screen. Let's see. Oops, that's my calendar. That's okay. Here we go. This is what Jamboard looks like. It's starts as a blank screen, but we've added in a little bit of structure so that you can add in your images that come to mind by county, because we're interested in outreach to each of the counties in our SCAG region. So I see some of you are maybe already in here, but I just want to let you know what you can do. So one of the things you can do is add a sticky note. You can add a note like this and press save, and that will show up in it. I think it just places it randomly, but you can then move it to anywhere you want it and shrink it and expand it. Just like I think it is maybe similar to PowerPoint users if you've used this before. You can also, a really cool feature of this is you can add your own images, but you can also do a Google image search. So environmental justice, and add in word cloud or any image that you would like to. You can shrink it, put it in. If this is you live and work in San Bernardino, maybe this means you put in a meaningful image. You can also directly just add a text box and add text. Oops. Okay. Also move it around as well. If you would like to edit your text or even your sticky note, you can press edit. That will bring up, allow you to edit, and then you can also delete it. We ask that you stay clear from this button up here. It says clear frame. It will delete everything. In the case that you do, there is an undo button. We ask that you keep everyone's ideas on here so that we can learn from everybody. So I also want to show you that this is just one of the slides. Obviously, SCAG region covers 6 counties, so the next 3 counties are on this slide. Oh, I love this, street trees. And then also the breakout room questions are on the following slides. There's an empty slide, but and then you can also browse all of the slides up here if needed. So if anyone has any questions at this time about how to use Jamboard, maybe if there's anything in the chat so far, I don't have the chat up, but or you could raise your hand or shout out. Hearing none, if you ever come across an issue with using this tool, I'm happy to answer questions. You can put them in the chat, or if it's after the listening session, feel free to email Anita, and her email was shared on the first slide. So I will then hand it back to Anita.
Thank you, Annalie. Great. Next slide, please. All right, so again, my name is Anita Au, and I will be providing an overview of the SCP Call for applications. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type it in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer everyone's question as we see them. And then we're also going to have a larger discussion Q&A session after this presentation before we go into our breakout rooms. So if you're looking at my camera right now, I'm actually not looking at the screen because I have 3 screens, so please pardon that. But I need to look at the presentation so I can provide you with correct information. So let me start. If you're not aware, SCAG Sustainable Communities Program started in 2005 and aims to provide resources and direct technical assistance to local jurisdictions. We've already completed 3 calls for applications in the 2020 and 2021 cycle to access funding and resources to meet the needs of local communities, address recovery and resilience strategies considering COVID-19 and support regional goals. So SCAG will release the 4th and final call for applications for this cycle for programs and projects centered on civic engagement, equity, and environmental justice in fall of 2021. Next slide, please. So the Sustainable Communities Program has overarching goals. The program aims to provide needed planning resources to local jurisdictions for active transportation and multimodal planning efforts, sustainability, land use, and planning for affordable housing. We want to promote, address, and ensure health and equity in regional land use and transportation planning, and to close the gap of racial injustice and better serve our communities of color. We want to encourage regional planning strategies to reduce motorized vehicle miles traveled, BMT, and greenhouse gas emissions, GHG, and particularly in EJ communities where there's the highest need for air quality improvements. We also want to develop local plans that support the implementation of key strategies and goals outlined in Connect SoCal's Sustainable Communities Strategy. Want to develop resources that support the key connections as outlined in Connect SoCal. We also want to support a resilient region that looks to climate adaptation and public health. And lastly, we want to increase the region's competitiveness for federal and state funds, including but not limited to the California Active Transportation Program and Greenhouse Gas Emissions Funds. So if you want to learn more about the overall program goals, you can learn about it at the SCP website on SCAG's website. Next slide, please. So now we're going into the actual call for applications, number 4, for our goals and objectives. Specifically for this call on civic engagement, equity, and environmental justice, we want to center and prioritize racial and social equity with technical assistance for local community-led engagement plans carried out by community-based organizations. We want to address the pervasive and deep inequities experienced in historically disinvested communities and communities of color. We want to include a broad range of project types, including land use and transportation activities, included in SCAG's Environmental Justice Toolbox. We want to support the development of racial equity and community engagement plans to address the digital divide, and efforts to promote health and equity to close the gap of racial inequities. And lastly, we want to support the goals in SCAG's Racial Equity Early Action Plan, Connect SoCal, and SCAG's Public Participation Plan. So to accomplish these goals, we have 4 objectives, which are to support local planning efforts, strategically invest and provide technical assistance for projects and programs in SCAG's communities of concern, and AB 535 disadvantaged communities, or we call DAC DACS for short. We want to support local planning efforts, focus on eliminating barriers to civic engagement for communities that have experienced historic disinvestment. We want to build community capacity, trust, and sustainable relationships with stakeholders in communities of color, including communities of concern and DACS, to strategically invest in local community-centered initiatives. And definitely, we want to prioritize communities identified and implement these projects. Next slide, please. So for the call for application structure, this program includes approximately 2 million and prioritizes projects categorized and focused in equity, environmental justice with robust civic engagement. So we want to meet community needs. So local agencies could apply with CBOs as sub-applicant, have that kind of partnership. And under an agency and CBO partnership, CBOs would be compensated as key elements of the project. And in addition, consultant teams would perform identified work on behalf of the local agency or the agency and CBO partnership. So there are a few different ways that different groups can apply for this call together or separately. Next slide, please. So to prioritize funding where there is the highest need, this call prioritizes funding in COCs and DACs. And we've also established funding ranges by county based on health disparities and concentrations of COCs, which are communities of concern, and DACs. So counties are grouped together to provide flexibility depending on the number of applications received by county. So Imperial and Los Angeles counties are the highest priority counties for this call due to the concentration of DACs and COCs. So there is, this is the proposed funding ranges for the grouped counties. For Imperial and LA, it's at $600,000 to $850,000. Riverside, it's Riverside and San Bernardino, it's $400,000 to $600,000, and Orange County and Ventura are $250,000 to $400,000. Again, this is proposed. So if you have any questions about that, then please feel free to put it in the chat, or we can discuss further. Next slide, please. So SCAG will hold a series of conversations and listening sessions like today with regional partners to support the development of the guidelines and shape the project types to ensure alignment with community need. So there is a two-step selection process. First, we're going to have agencies within priority areas, including COCs and DACs, to submit letters of interest based on program categories. And then it'll be reviewed by an evaluation team comprised of SCAG and agency staff. So after the review of the letters of interest, the applicants are invited to submit proposals for their projects, and this again is a proposed process that we're looking for feedback on for today. So to facilitate the application development, SCAG staff will be available via office hours and hold webinars as well to assist with the development. And the proposals are evaluated on a set of predetermined criteria co-developed with SCAG staff, regional partners, and stakeholders. Next slide, please. So to support the project shaping and partnership building, applicants could be invited to submit an optional letter of interest. So the letter of interest will be evaluated by an advisory committee comprised of SCAG staff, government partners, and other partners. And then again, as I mentioned, the evaluation will be based on predetermined publicly available evaluation criteria. SCAG staff would review and discuss these LOIs with applicants, and then we would be able to, once they're reviewed, we would invite the applicants to submit an application. And so this letter of interest process would be optional. So this is just one way that we can move forward with application submissions. But again, this is a work in progress. So we are looking for comments from you during this listening session to see how we can further improve this process, or if you like this approach already. Next slide, please. So here is the proposed scoring rubric and criteria. So we are, it includes three focus areas: project need, project design, and outcome, and partnerships and engagement. So application questions will vary based on project type. Again, they are focused on equity, environmental justice with a robust component of civic engagement. So applicants are encouraged to apply by completing an application. While one application is recommended, jurisdictions may submit multiple project applications if they choose. Next slide, please. So we have a good amount of example project types that we are providing for applicants to either use as an example or provide their own right now. So we have this slide includes 4 of the, I believe, 10 different example projects that we have. So the AB 617 implementation projects are really include partnerships with South Coast AQMD and include community emissions reduction plans, SERPs, or community air monitoring plans, CAMPs. And then our resilient communities include plans like the climate action and adaptation plans, local hazard mitigation plans, and infrastructure financing plans, SB 379 safety element compliance, as well as urban heat mitigation plans. So those are a few examples of what can fall under this category. We have SB 1000 EJ elements, or EJ related goals and policies. And then finally, we have connected communities, which includes a wide range of areas like access to broadband, freeway caps, and safe routes everywhere. Next slide, please. And then we have, please ignore the first 4 little icons. We're going to focus on the bottom 6 icons. These are more focused on civic engagement, but also we would want to see the projects that are submitted to have an equity and environmental justice component to it. But we have arts, culture, and design. We have parks, green, open, and public spaces, safety and community, climate action and resiliency, local campaigns and organization, and community healing and repair. So some examples for the arts, culture, and design can include community co-creation of art, public murals, performances, cultural planning, public space community design. Some examples for parks, green, open, and public spaces can include pop-up programming, improved culturally competent directional signs, and then if we're looking at some examples for climate action and resilience, we can look at community-led conservation and stewardship projects, or community-informed climate action playbooks. So there's, if you look at it, there's a wide range of projects that you can apply for this call. We do have more information on these different example project types in the guidelines when they are going to be released in September. So next slide, please. So now we're talking about the timeline. This is again subject to change, but from April to June, we did have the initial approach and strategy to develop this the proposed process that we have presented before you. Now we're in July. We're doing the listening sessions as well as doing one-on-one sessions, one-on-one meetings with CBOs, and then we will continue to work on the draft guidelines in August with hopefully our regional council approval and the opening of the call in September of 2021. And then from there, throughout winter of 2022, we're going to have the application development and evaluation for project recommendation and awards in spring of 2022. Again, this is subject to change based on basically a lot of different components. So next slide, please. So next steps, we based on the feedback that we received from today's listening session as well as Thursdays, SCAG will continue to develop the call for applications guidelines, and then the guidelines will be finalized and we will publicize and distribute the guidelines. And then we hopefully plan to open the call in early fall of 2021 following regional council approval of the program guidelines. Next slide, please. So we prepared for very basic breakout session questions, but I just before we go into these questions, I'm gonna pause here and see if there are any questions in the chat, or we're gonna open up like this larger group Q&A session with anyone that has questions, so we can get the conversation started. So I'm trying to, but I think
there's a question in the chat. Yeah, I can. It says, and Natalie, feel free to clarify your question, but sorry if I missed this, but how much are the grants for? And I saw the whole pot of funding on a slide for each region.
Yes, so we have 2 million for this call for applications, and the proposed funding ranges are for the different counties. So for example, if you are in Imperial County, you are in the top tier with LA County, and then your pot of the funding will range from 600 to 800, or sorry, 650 to 800,000.
Right. Just to clarify, but yes. How much are the actual grants for? Like if an entity was to apply?
How? Sorry, can you clarify? How much would the grant be for?
Like for example, like I'll just try to step in. Like, yeah, each applicant, are they applying for $100,000 grant, or is it a $200,000 grant? What is the kind of the minimum and maximum for each applicant?
Exactly. Thank you.
There currently isn't a minimum or maximum. It just depends on the scope of the project. And please, Dorothy, Julia, Hannah, chime in if I am wrong on that. I hope that answers your question. We don't have a minimum, we don't have a maximum. We have these ranges based on the different counties, and then we have the whole pot, which is 2 million.
The next question is from Sandy. Will there be an opportunity to provide SCAG a concept proposal before a full proposal? And Sandy, feel free to clarify if you need to.
Yeah, so I think what you're trying to get at is the letter of interest. That is kind of like the proposal of a proposal. So if we choose to go that route, then you'd be able to submit the preliminary proposal. And then when you submit the actual application, that's when your proposal will be more firmed up.
Okay, another question from Rochelle Mills. When does the project need to come online to be eligible this round? Rochelle, you might want to clarify what you mean by online.
If we've got a project that is that has to go through another year of funding, are you looking for something that has a shelf life of from the time the award is announced to, if it is a housing project or an arts project, that it will be implemented within the next 6 months, the next 12 months? Is there a shelf life?
Thanks for that, Rochelle. I think Hannah or Julia or Dorothy, can you guys respond to that? I'm not sure if there is right now.
Yeah, to rephrase that question, I think what Rochelle Mills is asking is the funding source, does it have a time-based limit? Does it end, for example? But Hannah, it looks like you're going to answer that.
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. I can jump in. So projects will likely, be starting in the spring 2022 timeframe, at least how our timeline is right now. And it's about a 2-year kind of funding cycle at this point. Does that help answer, Rochelle?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly that was even answered a question I didn't know I needed to ask. So thank you.
Great.
Excellent. All right, next question from Natalie Hernandez. Will the minimum maximum amounts of grant awards be included in the draft guidelines in August?
I don't think we we intend on having a minimum or maximum for each project. Again, it just depends on the project scope. But during like the letter of interest process, we do ask that if you do have an amount or budget for your proposed project to include that, so then we can include that into our discussion before submitting the application.
Mike Blockstein has a question to build on Rochelle's question. Will you be looking for existing or new projects or both?
We will be looking for both. Again, if we go back to the scoring rubric and for these calls, we're actually focusing more on project need as that area is scored the highest.
Question from Terrence Henson. Clarification, project scope is open-ended based on project type. Terrence, feel free to clarify your question if you'd like to.
Yeah, I was just saying, like the project type, you showed us all those different categories for those different types of projects. So we would take one of those types and then build out a project scope for one of those. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
Yes, so these are all example projects, and these are like all the projects that we can think of during this entire process, but then there could be other projects as long as we're looking for a project that incorporates equity and environmental justice with robust civic engagement component.
So it's even more open-ended than that.
Yes.
Got it.
I'll add another clarification, Terrence, and everyone. I think what we're also looking for is that that it responds to a local need. So it's a need from a jurisdiction as well as a community. That's the main request.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Okay, another question, also from Natalie. How many grantees are you planning to award approximately for each region? Since there are no minimum or maximums, it could be that there are 3 applicants, for example, that get $200,000 in grants.
Yes, and this is actually something that we discussed internally. We didn't want to put a number on the amount of projects that we're going to grant, and that's why we opted to do this amount, the funding funding ranges. So yes, that could be that could happen if we were to have no minimum maximum. We could award 3 applicants for grants that are amounted to $200,000 each.
Okay, another question from Sandy. Can CBOs partner with universities?
Hannah, do you want to take that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think, really what we're looking for is for local agencies to have meaningful partnerships with community-based organizations. And, that can include, organizations working in the environmental justice space and the civic engagement space. In terms of universities, I think, we definitely would welcome that partnership on the project. I think that's a good question. And I think we'll need to clarify and make sure that that's that we're able to do that within the funding of this program. So yeah, we'll make note of that and just make sure to follow up with you, Sandy.
I would, yeah, Julia, you want to add more? I also had a thought related to that, but go ahead, Julia.
No, just that it's a great question. And I'd love to dive into that eligibility a bit more, but Dorothy, curious, your thoughts?
Oh, just that I think we are deferential to the local jurisdiction. Universities may or may not be considered a jurisdiction in our definition, so that's kind of the clarification we would need to get. But no matter what, we're deferential to the local jurisdiction.
Are there any more questions that anyone has?
It looks like there are none flowing in so far, and we'll have time to answer more afterwards. So that was a great round so far.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. Now we are going to go into our breakout rooms, but please don't leave. I just saw 2 people leave. Please, it's gonna be great. We have 30 minutes dedicated to these breakout sessions, and as you see, we already have 4 questions ready. But then we are open to just having open conversations and dialogues, as well as doing a further in-depth demonstration of the Jamboard if needed. So these questions of the breakout questions are a proposed application structure is that CBOs could serve as a sub-applicant alongside a public agency or jurisdiction. What are the challenges and what are the opportunities? I think that can have a lot of conversation. Also, how can the application process be more accessible? We definitely want to get input on that. How do you feel about the project types and categories? Have we captured everything that you're looking for, or is there more that we can add to the guidelines? And then lastly, what remaining unresolved questions you have in terms of the application process? How can we address your remaining concerns? So these questions are also going to be provided in the chat during the breakout sessions. So and I think that's it. But please feel free to, if you have any questions, these will be smaller group discussions. So we try to have a larger group to answer questions in this smaller group approach to get more of an intimate setting. So you can dive into the questions that you have. So with that, I don't know, Ed, if you're ready, that we can divide ourselves up randomly into our breakout sessions, and we will meet back at 12:45.
I hope that was a productive session for all of you. I know Hannah and I had a really great discussion in our breakout session. I'm just pulling my notes up here now. Hold on. All right. There we go. So I don't know if anyone would like to, any of the SCAG facilitators, would anyone like to volunteer and send, sorry, I'm reading something, and share what was discussed in their breakout room?
Yeah, this is Anita. I can share a few highlights from our breakout room. we had about like 5 people join, and it was really great. We actually talked a little bit about the questions, but then mainly we talked about what we did amongst each other, and it was really great conversation. Based on our discussion, we found that the application approach seems to work very well, especially having this letter of interest process, which is can be beneficial for both parties, because it saves time to have like a pre-proposal, so we can work out some kinks before doing the actual application process. And then also the aspect of having a subrecipient, CBO subrecipient, it could definitely have some difficulties, but it's also great to leverage a relationship with CBOs and local jurisdictions to do more for the community. So those are some main points that we discussed during our breakout session.
Awesome. That sounds like a great breakout session. How about another facilitator from SCAG? Anyone else like to volunteer?
I'm happy to bring up a few of the things that came up for me in mind.
Go for it, Ryan. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So one of the things, and I think this is similar to what Anita's already brought up, was a discussion about potential conflicts around the CBO local jurisdiction partnership, how there may be a bit of contention, and perhaps we might not necessarily be able to access some of the CBO applicants we would like to, simply because of that. Also, there was a discussion about the some CBOs also maybe being limited in terms of their capacity. So from the other angle, if you are a local jurisdiction and you need to have a CBO partner, maybe not being able to actually get their participation simply because they don't have the bandwidth. So there are kind of issues on both sides that were brought up. I also have a question that was brought up that I think would be great if we'd be able to get other folks from SCAG to be able to answer, because I wasn't able to answer it myself. But when it comes to the application, is there going to be a requirement to use like clear research-based, evidence-based tools for some of the asks that are going to be coming in an application? Like, are folks going to need to have an advanced model to be able to show the impact of what it is they're proposing?
That's a great question. Maybe Hannah or Julia, you want to answer?
Brian, maybe can you clarify a little bit about that question? What I'm hearing is, are folks needing to have like evidence-based data to back up what they're including in the application? Is that right? Is that the question?
That is my interpretation. However, Sandy is still here. So Sandy, would you like to ask live?
Yeah, okay. So my question was concerning some of the, based on the needs assessments and concerning some of the models that will come out of the program, especially in community healings or in any type, will there be a requirement for the applicant to use evidence-based model programs to substantiate what they're doing, or do the community, they could create their own initiatives or own strategies based on what they believe would be a good strategy? Because so many times government agencies will say, well, in order for you to provide healing to communities, or order you to provide good urban forestry programs, you really need to use data and research initiatives to reinforce what you're doing, so that there's some outcomes in there that we feel comfortable about. Or or are we going to be able to just draft our own strategies?
This is Julia. I think that's such a great question. And I think that this comes back to community need and communities being familiar with what works and how to respond to that need. And so I think evidence-based practices can be valuable and sometimes can be inaccessible. So I think the value in a really thoughtful project and a thoughtful strategy is something that's going to work really well in the community that you have been navigating, and we'll be able to propose that, or I'm sorry, you'll be able to propose that in the application. We'd love to see those sort of creative approaches that perhaps haven't been documented before. But yeah, I think that's a really, really great point.
And Sandy, I'll chime in here as well. I think, and sorry about the background noise. I think also you just explaining why the kind of top-down government approach to requiring communities to substantiate their work, explaining why that is problematic would be excellent in an application, because that's evidence, right? So I think your question, just expand upon that, and I think that would be an excellent application.
Yeah. Thank you.
This is Arnold. I just wanted to weigh in on the first thing that Ryan said about, if I understood correctly, that there may be some CBOs that cities and counties and COGs and county transportation commissions, they may find that they're at odds with some of these CBOs because they're trying to really push the envelope on things that, when cities and counties and commissions, they have a set path, they have identified list of projects they have to build and deliver. And then you have this CBO showing up saying, hey, we want you to spend money on this kind of thing. So I think that's what Ryan was talking about, that we don't want CBOs to be intimidated by whatever it is they want to do. They should be free to do what they want, right? It's my understanding. So I don't know.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Arnold, for those comments. We're reaching the end of our time together. We're gonna don't want to go over our time at one. So I will hand it off to Anita for some closing remarks. But this has been an amazing discussion, and look forward to continuing these conversations in the future. So Anita.
Thank you, Annalie. And thank you all for participating in today's a listening session and breakout sessions. As we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, as well as a summary of the Q&A during our larger group discussion, as well as during the breakout sessions, we're going to be emailing that to all registered participants. So if you actually joined this call without registering, which I don't think that actually could happen since you get the Zoom link through registration. But if you haven't, please go ahead and go back and register so we can provide you with the presentation as well as a summary. And if you have any other questions or follow-up questions, please feel free to contact myself or Hannah. Both our contact information are provided in the presentation, as well as will be provided in the post-session email. And as a friendly reminder, the Jamboard is open and will be open for the next week or so. So if you have anything else you would like to add, any images, any thoughts on the EJ imagery, as well as the 4 different questions from the breakout session, please feel free to do so. Thank you again. Oh, yay. I hope my reminder reminded some of you to fill out the Jamboard, because it's a great device that we can use to gather not just like notes and stuff, but also images and word clusters and whatnot. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us at this listening session. And we really hope that you stay safe and healthy. And if there's nothing else, then we will be giving you back 4 minutes of your day. So enjoy that. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Enjoy your
Good
lunch.
to see you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.